I think though there will likely be a relief rally back up. Obviously right now I think Bitcoin has gone up the last couple of weeks or so, but I'm not sure that we're in the rally just yet. In 2021, it took 2.5 months for the relief rally to begin. So if that happens this time, it might correspond to like late December,
okay, which
could also correspond to when the balance sheet starts to go back up at the Fed. So there could be kind of like liquidity is returning, super cycle, like that kind of narrative. And especially with 3 months of selling in a row, it seems like you could have some type of relief bounce.
Yeah.
On that relief bounce, I think Bitcoin will likely put in a lower high. Because we haven't had a euphoric top, I am open-minded to a new all-time high.
In the current market lull following recent pressures, Bitcoin has edged higher over the past couple of weeks. Yet, the true relief rally probably still awaits in the wings. Looking back to 2021, it took roughly 2.5 months after 3 consecutive months of selling before the bounce gained real traction, pointing to a potential start around late December this year. That time frame aligns neatly with when the Federal Reserve's balance sheet might begin expanding again, sparking narratives around fresh liquidity flows and hopes for a new supercycle amid the exhaustion from prolonged selling. Popular Bitcoin analyst Benjamin Cowen, in a recent interview, pointed out how this setup echoes those past cycles, where such relief bounces often follow heavy drawdowns and build quick optimism. He anticipates Bitcoin forming a lower high on this upswing, since the cycle's earlier top came without the hallmark euphoria that usually lights up reversal indicators on charts. Even so, Cowen keeps an open mind to the chance of pushing to a new all-time high if unexpected catalysts emerge, underscoring the need for measured expectations in these volatile phases. So with sentiment muted, liquidity poised to return, and technicals hinting at a familiar pattern, we must ask, what if the market is about to prove everyone's expectations wrong again? Stay tuned as we bring you more clips from Benjamin Cowen. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for additional in-depth content. Thanks for joining us again. Enjoy the rest of the video.
One of the main theses for this entire bull market that I had was like, okay, if we're in a higher for longer interest rate environment, and if we're in quantitative tightening, it makes sense to just stick with Bitcoin until that stuff comes to an end, or we go to lower rates. If the Fed funds rate goes below the neutral rate, which I've sort of approximated as the 2-year Treasury yield, when that stuff happens, it makes sense to potentially pivot, because that's what happened last cycle. The thing that happened last cycle that was different was that all the monetary policy stuff changed in the pre-halving year rather than the end of the post-halving year. And that's what's made it so difficult. These market conditions are actually the exact same market conditions I launched my YouTube channel under. Because I launched my YouTube channel in 2019, right before quantitative tightening ended, and right around the time that Bitcoin topped out at that sort of intermediate peak in 2019. Back then, there was also very little retail interest. To be completely honest, though, Bitcoin's trading at the same price it was a year ago, right? And that was the argument about Bitcoin dominance, was that even after the top for Bitcoin is in, it'll still hold up better than altcoins for a while. And last cycle, what happened is that Bitcoin dominance topped about a month after quantitative tightening ended. And it did so, one of the reasons is the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve didn't even start going up until a few weeks after QT ended, because the last batch of treasuries didn't mature until a few weeks later. So I kind of think we're repeating everything from back then. The main difference is that it's starting to line up, unfortunately, with the midterm year.
Yeah.
Now, in 2019, when QT ended, altcoins bottomed against Bitcoin about a month later. So I actually do see a scenario in the not so distant future where altcoins potentially, I know this sounds crazy, they might actually find some lows against Bitcoin that could hold for a while. The problem is that if it plays out like 2019, which is going to be my base case because monetary policy has to sufficiently change for me to change my view, if it plays out like that, you would see Bitcoin dominance fall, but not because of a quote-unquote alt season, but because altcoins already got annihilated in the bull market, so they don't have as much to drop in the bear market.
Yeah.
And the same thing, we've seen the same thing happen in plenty of bull markets in the past, where the blue chips of the industry do very, very well, the bear market arrives, and then the micro caps outperform the blue chips, but it's because the micro caps just don't do anything. They don't go anywhere, and it's the blue chips that give a lot back because now they have to drop just like the micro caps did before them. So that's where I kind of think we are. I think we just are in this phase where we're sort of slowly drifting down. I think there's going to be a counter trend rally probably in early 2026 is what I think. And the reason I think that is because I think a lot of the people that are selling now are doing so because they're like, well, cycle's over. Let's just get out. I could see a counter trend rally. Actually, in 2021, we had 3 red months, November, December, January, and then we had a 2-month counter trend rally in February and March. And if December ends up closing red, which it very well might, that's 3 months in a row of red. And so I could see it. And there's also people betting on a super cycle like there always is. And so usually there's something that happens in the early part of the midterm year that makes the super cycle guys think they're right to kind of, but then it usually leads to a lower high. So that's where I am. I think we're going to see some macro headwinds into about mid-2026. That actually it would line up perfectly with a 2019 bear market, where you had about a 9-month bear market or so. I do think narrative follows price. Absolutely. I also think the market is well ahead of what where the news cycle is, 6 to 12 months ahead in some cases. The market is forward looking. If you think about it, in 2022, really the end of 2022, when FTX was collapsing and all the FUD there was and all the sort of like crypto is dying and all this stuff, 2023, we had, what choke point operation, what all these different operations they had. They were cracking down on exchanges. They were picking different exchanges off one by one, going after a lot of different companies. It was crazy, right? But what was also happening during that entire time is we were in a bull market.
Yeah.
And now that, we had this pro-crypto administration, I think a lot of people thought that it had to mean this like really great thing for the crypto asset class, but markets have a way of pricing things in like way before they happen. So by the time they happen, the opposite thing starts to happen. So that's kind of what I think is going on. To speak bluntly, I mean, I think we've kind of lost our way this cycle in a sense. Like I think a lot of people were focused more on meme coins, and it's not any like one person's fault. It's just like the industry as a whole seemed to start rewarding meme coins and the developers of those. And so I think that kind of led a lot of other developers that may have been building in crypto, they kind of like went over to AI.
Yeah.
Where their potential return on their time investment would have been more valuable. Because a lot of developers, I think they had to struggle with what's the point of developing if someone can just launch a meme coin and outperform my project, that I've been spending 4 years working on.
Yeah.
It's got to be kind of demoralizing at some point. And so I feel like we're going through this maturing process as an industry where we have to find what's actually important and reward the people that are actually building something useful and not the people that are, going after the quick cash grab, if that makes sense. So I do think that, going into this year, it certainly made sense that we had a sort of a local high around the inauguration day just because of all the hype around it. And it made sense we had a high in Q4 as well. I mean, in a lot of ways, it played out like it normally does, just less euphoric. But that's also an artifact of what we've seen before as well, and that's diminishing returns, right? Every cycle we have diminishing returns. So it's easy to look back on things and be like, well, this is the reason why. It's because of monetary policy. It's because of whatever happened. But in reality, we've always had diminishing returns, and maybe this cycle we didn't get this alt season that people were wanting. Perhaps that's because of monetary policy. There's been a lot of uncertainty as well. There's been uncertainty with the labor market and how AI is affecting it. There's been uncertainty with things like tariffs, right?
Yeah.
Are we going to have tariffs? Are we not? It kind of freezes a lot of entrepreneurs. I've spoken with a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of the general consensus is they don't know what to do because they're like, well, do I proceed with expanding my business in this way, or do I wait to get more clarity on tariffs? And a lot of them want to wait until there's more clarity on tariffs, and I think that's kind of holding things back as well. I think that ultimately narrative follows price, but it's so easy to find the narratives to sort of justify okay, we're at higher interest rates. And by the way, I don't think we've ever had an alt season when the Fed funds rate was sort of durably above the 2-year yield, right? It's the major alt seasons the past 2017 and then also in 2021, they were at least somewhat equivalent, or below. Where we were in looser territory. We weren't in restrictive territory. And so that's been something this cycle and it kind of shows you why Bitcoin dominance matters, why the blue chips matter is because not every cycle does not promise that the microcaps will pump as well.
The core bull market thesis. Stick with Bitcoin during higher for longer rates and quantitative tightening until policy eases below the neutral rate, approximated by the 2-year Treasury yield, like last cycle's pivot. Conditions mirror 2019, right before QT ended, and Bitcoin peaked intermediately, with low retail interest as now. Bitcoin trades at last year's price, backing dominance holding post-top better than alts. Last cycle, it topped a month after QT due to delayed Treasury maturities. Altcoins may bottom against Bitcoin soon, dominance dropping not from alt season, but alt's early annihilation, leaving fewer downsides. Expect an early 2026 counter-trend rally after 3 red months, like 2021, tricking supercycle hopes into lower highs amid mid-2026 macro headwinds, echoing 2019's 9-month bear. Market price news 6 to 12 months ahead, so pro-crypto Trump shifts got baked in early. Meme coin focus sidelined builders to AI. Industry matures toward utility. Local highs near inauguration Q4 show diminishing returns. Tariff/labor/AI. Uncertainty freezes entrepreneurs, and alt seasons need looser policy. Fed funds near/below 2-year yields, favoring blue chips.
I think there is an argument for focusing on the data, but I do like to know what's going on in the industry as well. Like I want to know, what are the latest trends, but I'm not using the headlines to trade, right? Yeah. Like I'm not reading a headline and being like, oh, I need to go sell my Bitcoin or I need to go buy Bitcoin because of this headline. I mostly just trade based on if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? The 4-year cycle has been a thing forever. And at some point, it will break. At some point, it will. And you can actually look towards the stock market for that. The stock market has gone through periods where it operated in 4-year cycles. There was major low by the stock market, I believe, in 1958, 1962, 66, 1970, 1974, 1978, 1982. And every 4 years, like clockwork, there was a major low in the stock market. And then 1986 rolled around and there wasn't a drop. And then we went up, and then the big low was in 1987 and the stock market crashed like 35%, essentially like overnight, and it wiped a ton of people out. But I think like it's one of those things where we can always bet on it being different. But the reality is it's probably not going to be different more often than not. And so you're better off just assuming that it's more or less the same, accepting the fact that at some point in the future, you will be wrong, right? Yeah. Like following that strategy, the 4-year cycle will eventually break at some point, and when it happens, you'll have to accept that I'm wrong at that point. It seems like a fool's errand trying to predict exactly when that's going to break, because in reality, while this cycle feels different, we bottomed at the end of the midterm year, like we always do, and we topped in Q4 of the post-halving year, potentially, like we always do.
Yeah.
And so you could argue that if someone ignored the headlines and just bought Bitcoin in Q4 2022 and then sold Bitcoin, if they wanted to, in Q4 2025, they could have ignored everything that happened in between and they would have made a 7 to 8x on their investment.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to worry about ETFs. They didn't have to worry about Operation Choke Point. They didn't have to worry about the presidential election. You didn't worry about nothing. Just literally do exactly what would have worked in the cycle before and you would have been incredibly successful. So you could argue that, hey, maybe that's going to work again. Maybe the right move here is into 2026. Maybe that's the next great opportunity to really get in. But I mean, I do think the hard part with this cycle is that while it did top when it normally does, it wasn't a very euphoric top. And really, when you look at like risk metrics, if you look at like on-chain data, like things like the terminal price, the supply and profit and loss. Like if you look at a lot of different metrics, the Pi cycle top indicator, a lot of those things did not trigger this cycle.
Yeah.
Right. And it looks a lot like 2019 when they did not trigger, because when you top on apathy, the top signal, the top indicators don't fire off.
Yeah.
You have to top on euphoria. Now we might get that next cycle. It's not impossible. If it happens next cycle, it might take look like a left translated cycle, or maybe you get like an earlier peak or something. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I do think you can be incredibly successful in crypto without following the news. But I like to somewhat loosely know what's going on, just so when I'm with people in the industry. So in most of the bear markets, there's a rally. Not all of them. I think the one in 2014 didn't reach it, but usually there's a rally back up to the 200-day moving average or the 50-week moving average. They tend to kind of correspond to each other when we get the rally back up. Those valuations are still above 100K right now. I don't know where they'll be by the time we rally to them, but they could still be around those levels. It takes a while for the 50-week moving average to change because it's based on the last 50 weeks. And those are both above 100K. So normally what happens is you get your drop from the peak, and then by the third month, which is where we're in right now, you're convincing the final people in that early drop that it's the bear market.
Yeah.
After 3 months, the people that were going to be convinced are already convinced. You run out of sellers, and then you get that relief rally as the super cycle guys, kind of like they went out in the short term.
Yeah.
So I think though there will likely be a relief rally back up. Obviously right now I think Bitcoin has gone up the last couple of weeks or so, but I'm not sure that we're in the rally just yet. Mm-hmm. In 2021, it took 2.5 months for the relief rally to begin. So if that happens this time, it might correspond to late December, which could also correspond to when the balance sheet starts to go back up by the Fed. So there could be kind of liquidity is returning, super cycle, that kind of narrative. And especially with 3 months of selling in a row, it seems like you could have some type of relief bounce.
Yeah.
On that relief bounce, I think Bitcoin will likely put in a lower high. Because we haven't had a euphoric top, I am open-minded to a new all-time high. And I think because of that, I no matter what, I always hold at least 20 to 30% of my Bitcoin stack. Because I have to accept that no matter how opinionated I am, and even if I got this right and that right, it doesn't mean I'm always going to be right about everything, right?
Yeah.
So I always keep some in case. But I think the most likely outcome is you have a rally to a lower high by Bitcoin in early 2026. You could have some divergent highs on alts. There could be some new all-time highs on some altcoins. Just like in 2022, we saw Luna go to new all-time highs in 2022, and then it collapsed to zero, right? So you can have that. You can have some new all-time highs in some of the lower market cap stuff. Just because they've been beaten down so much for so long, if there's any sense of, if there's a sniff of liquidity, you could have a few. And even recently we saw Zcash go on a major rally, right?
Yeah.
So you can still have a few, but I don't think you're going to have a market-wide alt season, if that makes sense. And the reason for that is if you look at the social interest, in both prior alt seasons in 2017 and 2021, retail interest was trending up the entire year before the alt season happened. But in this year, retail interest has been trending down.
Yeah.
And the only way you can really get an alt season is if more people are coming into the space. If you don't, that the amount of money going into alts continues to reduce. So I see a relief bounce that will probably last a couple of months.
Okay.
And then I think there'll be another drop kind of in sometime in the March, April, May timeframe going into the summer. And if you think last cycle, what's really interesting is that MicroStrategy basically bottomed in May of 2022. I think a lot of people don't remember that. But it wicked below the May low in December, I believe. Okay. But essentially the bottom was formed in May. So there is a chance that if it plays out like the 2019 bear market, there's a chance we bottom maybe by mid-2026.
Okay.
Which is not necessarily my base case. But if you think about Ethereum bottomed in summer 2022, right?
Yeah.
It's not impossible for that to happen, especially if more people get on the Bitcoin bandwagon. The Bitcoin dominance is more important than all these altcoin stuff. It's possible. I think you have to be open-minded to a low, though, that could be further out as late as October 2026, because most bear markets last 1 year. But in general, I see I see kind of a slow progression down. But one of the reasons why I think by mid-2026 you could start to see some tailwinds start to develop will be that they're going to replace Powell, more than likely, as the chair of the Federal Reserve. He'll still be there, but he won't be the chair.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, I'm going to guess what's going to happen is the people that the guy that goes in is going to want to lower rates aggressively.
Yeah.
Now, this is what actually unfortunately happened in the late 1990s is they lowered rates. And when they lowered rates too aggressively, they reignited the animal spirits in all of us. And there's an animal spirit in all of us that secretly craves that alt season, We all want it to happen, even if we pretend
it's beaten down, but it's still there.
Yeah, everyone wants it to happen.
Benjamin Cowen argues for focusing on data over headlines. staying informed on industry trends without letting news dictate trades like selling Bitcoin on a bad story. He sticks to the 4-year cycle, which has held reliably, much like stock market lows every 4 years from 1958 to 1982 until it broke in 1986, leading to the 1987 crash. Cowen notes that betting on change is tempting, but patterns persist more often, so assume continuity while accepting eventual failure. Crypto bottomed at the end of the midterm year as usual, topped in Q4 post-halving like before. Ignoring headlines, buying Bitcoin in Q4 2022 and selling in Q4 2025 would yield 7 to 8 times returns, bypassing ETF drama, choke points, or elections. This cycle's top lacked euphoria, with on-chain metrics like Pi cycle, terminal price, and supply profit loss not triggering, akin to 2019's apathy peak. He always holds 20 to 30% Bitcoin, hedging against being wrong. Cowen expects a rally to a lower high early 2026, possible altcoin divergent highs like Luna's 2022 blow-off or recent Zcash surge. However, there has been no market-wide alt season since retail interest trends went down, unlike 2017 or 2021 uptrends. Anticipating a relief bounce for months, then a drop March-May into summer, he sees potential mid-2026 bottom like 2019's bear or last cycle's May MicroStrategy, and summer Ethereum lows, though open to October if bears last a year. Tailwinds may emerge mid-2026, with Jerome Powell's chair replacement sparking aggressive rate cuts, risking reignited animal spirits craving alt euphoria, as in the late 1990s. As we wrap up, do you think Bitcoin could surprise us with a new all-time high during this relief rally? Or will it stick to forming a lower high like the patterns suggest? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Share this video and hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.